You're listening to the Young Buck Old Buck podcast, presented by Forest and Sky, sponsored by Chops & Co. Public Market.
There we go. Heads up.
Touch him up. Dead bird. Dead bird. Get him, Sky. Get him.
Good job, buddy. Keep flopping.
You're listening to the Young Buck Old Buck podcast. I'm your host, Young Buck Daniel DeForge, and this week is a little different because I don't have Bruce. I don't have my old buck, but instead I have Jake from Bowhunting Pressured Whitetails. Jake is a common friend between Will and I, and Jake, thanks for being on the podcast this week.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We're super excited. I've just been talking with Jake for the first time. We've chatted for about 5-10 minutes, been able to hear a little bit of your story, and I'm excited for our audience to hear more. First, why don't you just kind of paint a picture? What is Bowhunting Pressured Whitetails? You have an Instagram, you have a YouTube. How long have you been doing this, and kind of map out your journey for us a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So Bowhunting Pressured Whitetails is my YouTube channel. And I think I've had it for probably about 5 years. And to be honest, it's just kind of my hobby, which you might not get that impression when you first go there, because I do have a professional media background. I used to do content creation, video production as my main job. And then I kind of phased out of that, and now I flip houses as my main line of work. But I still love making content, especially when it comes to hunting. Just, documenting hunts and everything is just, I can't stop myself, honestly. So, but yeah, so it's honestly just a hobby. And but I do get, those yearly checks from YouTube. So I'm like, hey, that's cool. If I can ever get to the point where I'm able to offset some of those expenses and stuff, then, and the whole thing's a write-off. So yeah. Every time I go out on out-of-state hunt, I'm like, there we go.
That's awesome. So, you primarily are a Michigan hunter, but like you mentioned, you do make it out of state. But, as far as the game that you're pursuing, whitetail is your niche, correct?
Yeah, I'm freaking in love with hunting whitetails. Like, it is my bread and butter. It's what I think about every single month out of the year. Like, my wife always complains that, like, there's never not a deer season. Like, it's just deer all the way through. Like, as soon as you come out of the hunting season, like, there's a little bit of a lull where you're like, oh, it's so cold, I don't want to go outside. But then after that, it's like scouting, stand prep, trail cameras, like, and it just keeps going and going and going all the way through. But yeah, whitetails is my thing. And then if I'm not hunting, obviously I love going after some turkeys, but I'd say bass fishing would be my second thing. Like, if I had to give up whitetails, I'd probably try to be a pro bass fisherman.
Wow.
Unsuccessfully, but I would probably really try.
All right, cool. Well, we have 3 segments of this show. First, we start with the outdoors update, and then we'll go into the meat, and we'll get to know Jake some more and kind of his journey. And then we're going to end up talking about the Lord together, which I'm excited for that. A little bit of an outdoors update from my end. We're ramping up for turkey season. We're around 3 weeks away at this point. And so I got some trail cameras out this week, and man, the birds have been fired up. I got some pretty cool photos that I'll drop in the YouTube video if you're watching that video. So excited for that. Do you have any cameras out right now for turkeys?
I've been trying to poll them.
Okay.
I don't really put cameras out for turkeys. I don't know. For me, turkeys, I'm like, I just kind of go out there and, chase them, but I don't get too crazy serious with it. But.
All right. Well, one thing I would be curious about, because you hunt a lot of public land, correct?
Yeah.
And I really branch over into public only kind of during turkey season.
Right.
And so I was actually thinking about putting out some cameras on public land this year for the first time. I bought those, lock boxes with the cables.
Nice.
How I would be curious to know, from your experience of hunting public land and putting cameras out there, how many cameras have you gotten stolen or damaged or whatever?
I've had one stolen.
Okay.
And I'm running about 25 cell cams now.
Wow.
And I'm running about 5 non-cell cams. And I think this past year I had probably at least around 15 deployed on public, and I didn't have a single one stolen.
That's incredible.
So I think, honestly, the whole trail cam stealing thing has drastically shifted when cell cams became a thing, because I think before cell cams, there was just this common knowledge of like the camera's out there in the woods. No one knows what happens until the hunter goes and retrieves his SD card, obviously. And so guys would do crazy stuff, like you hear about all these stories of people coming out and chopping the whole freaking tree down to get somebody's lockbox off. Like, I've had some crazy stuff. I've had people break into those lockboxes. So I don't even worry about it now. Like, when I first started running cameras, I just kind of put them up high. So I'd bring a climbing stick out, and then I'd put them up probably, 10 feet or so, just out of reach. And, didn't have any stolen there. And then I just started to get a little bit more brave, and I started putting my cell cams down, regular height. Because honestly, you get better triggers, when they're at, standard height, and you can see way more in the background. And so I started doing that, and I haven't had any stolen either. But I am running the Spy Point Link Micros, which is a relatively small form factor camera. Like, it's a pretty small camera compared to some of the Moultries and stuff out there that are a little more beefy. And then on top of that, I never use the straps that come with the cameras. I run paracord, camo paracord. And on top of that, I spray paint every single one.
Really?
So I take flat spray paint. I use a mix of khaki and olive green, and I have a little stencil kit. It's kind of my weird summer hobby, but I go out and I spray paint every single one, and it takes the shine off, it doles them out. And sometimes I have a hard time finding my cell cams when I'm going back to get them. So
You're on Onyx just trying to follow the pins.
Well, I have to take a picture of them on the tree so I can even find the spot they were at.
Yeah.
But
well, that's intense. No wonder this is a year-round thing for you, man. I mean, you're all in.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's cool. Well, yeah, so let's go ahead, and we're just going to dive right in. You talked about your YouTube channel. We'll drop in, your YouTube page and Instagram page for our audience to check you out. But when did you first start your hunting journey? When was your first hunt?
Yeah, so I grew up, my dad did hunt a little bit, but he was a meat hunter. He went out to provide for the family. So I grew up kind of seeing him bring back the 30-30 back when we lived up north, and I thought that was super cool. He gave us his spent cartridges and stuff like that. But I was more just into the outdoors in general as a kid. Like that kind of stuff, like the stuff he did inspired me to just kind of get into the outdoors. And so one of those things was like smaller animals and things like we got into this thing where we were bringing home roadkills, and it'd be anything from coons to possums to whatever else we could find, coyotes, and he'd bring them home, we'd skin them out, and then I had this book that would show me all the different types of tanning solutions and stuff, and so I was tanning them up, and I was doing all this stuff. So I just was super into the outdoors as a kid, and it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I kind of started, like the whole Whitetails thing just was like super cool, because it was just like this elusive animal. Like the big buck was like this elusive animal, and you're like, I never see anybody that kills big bucks. Like, these are sick, and like, how in the world do I do this? And so I started following some of, like the magazines were a huge thing back then, go to the dentist's office and you're just flipping through this thing like, wish I could afford these, And then from that it went to like, I'd pick up DVDs. Me and my brother would rent out every single hunting DVD in the district libraries within probably 50 miles. We were watching all the Dean Wenzel stuff and the old Drury Outdoors stuff, and like I cut my teeth on the Drury Outdoors and the old Lee Lukoski and Real Tree Monster Bucks and all that stuff. Yeah. Like, me and my brother just ate that up. So that's kind of what like inspired me, like gave me the fuel to go out and do it on my own. And then from there, it was just a giant learning experience.
Okay. So was your, the first time that you kind of made that leap on hunting on your own, were you an adult at that point?
Yeah. So I think I was like, I was probably around like 14 or so when I had my first hunt, and it was one of those situations where I was like, Dad, we're going hunting, it was youth day. So it was my first opportunity to get out there, and he was like, all right. And, he was really great with going out with me when I was younger and get me out in the woods, but we went out on the youth hunt. And we had permission on this farm that was across the street from where I was living with my parents. And so we went back there, we set up, and there was a kind of an inside corner of a standing cornfield, and then behind us was woods. So we kind of sat right in that spot where you could see into the corn and you could see into the woods. And right away we saw a really nice 8-pointer, like, you know, probably mid-130s 8-pointer, comes up in the woods. We see him come up, and he drops down into this ditch, and he sits down in the ditch with his head barely poking up, and he just sits there like watching these open woods for probably like 10 minutes. And then he jumps up out of the ditch and he starts walking across the woods, and he's like right on the edge that we had permission to hunt. And so I just, you know, shot at him, you know, a couple times, and I just had open sights, you know, like a smoothbore shotgun type thing, and I flat out clean missed him. We went out there looking for blood, and, you know, of course nothing. I was just so bummed. And my dad's like, well, you know, we still got like 45 minutes of light left. Like, we should sit down. So kudos for my dad. We sat back down. It wasn't like 5 minutes later. We had just sat through this huge rainstorm. And so we're sitting there, and it wasn't 5 minutes later that I hear this, like, in the mud, you know, like, and it was a deer that had just snuck up on us in that cornfield. And it was a little 6-pointer. And he started feeding probably 10 yards from us, and I was like, oh, this is my chance. And I pull my gun up, I, you know, line up the bead and everything, and pull the trigger, and it goes click, because I forgot to rechamber a freaking shell. Yeah, I forgot to rechamber after, you know, missing that first buck, and I was like, ah! I just stood there frozen, and this buck, you know, whips his head up, staring me down. And so my dad always talks about this, how he's so proud of my patience because I just froze. And then I slowly lowered my gun, ended up flipping it over, rechambering another shell, raising it back up, and shooting this buck without him spooking or anything. And I put a double lung shot, and he went like 20 yards and killed over. So.
And then you were hooked.
Oh, yeah. I was definitely hooked at that point. But
that's awesome.
Yep.
So your page is Bowhunting Whitetails.
Yeah.
When did you start the bow hunting journey?
Probably around the same time that I shot my first deer. Okay. I was like immediately went and bought a bow, and me and my brother always went to the local archery shop down here, close to my house, which was Plainwell, and we were looking at the cheapest bow we could possibly find, and just imagining if we had the money, man, we'd buy that bow. And we were about the same size, so we were like, we'll share it, you know? Like, the whole like custom bow to yourself thing just didn't exist. And we finally ended up buying one. I think it was like the Bear Apprentice or something. It was a really old version. And yeah, I slung arrows at deer with that thing. Never did hit anything. But I had a freaking blast, you know. And I had one experience with a really nice buck walking past me, and me just flipping out, and, you know, never got shot off at it, but just the pure adrenaline of seeing deer and needing them to be that close. Just, you know, that was like a totally different level. I ended up finally shooting a deer with my bow, and it was, you know, super close, and I had actually rattled it in, which rattling doesn't work in Michigan. Well, it did on that point, you know.
That 137 up in the living room?
Did you rattle that?
Yeah, 100%.
Jeez.
Rattle and grunt.
Yeah. It was like first week of of bow season, and I just clicked the antlers together until 6-point comes up the hill, and, you know, smoked them. And so, yeah, I was definitely hooked after that.
Yeah. Cool. And so, you know, talk to us. Your journey definitely didn't stop. I mean, you talked about having a background in doing videography in the hunting industry, and then now you have your own page and you create your own content. Kind of walk us through that journey, you know, graduating high school, and then where did you go from there, and what did you pursue? Yeah,
so I'd say I think it was my senior year that I got my first big buck, quote unquote. It's not really that big, but first big buck kill on film. And it was something that me and my brother we were trying so hard to accomplish this goal. And we had bought this camera, and it was running on these little mini DV tapes, you know, and you had to do this huge process to even see them on your computer. But we were filming all of our hunts with that, and we were hanging double sets and all this stuff. And we managed to get our first big buck kill down on film, and it was like, man, I'm gonna be a legend, dude. I'm gonna be a TV star. And we had this thing in our mind where like, well, we got to get on a hunting show, like they're gonna eat this stuff up, after I just smoked 100-incher, and so I was like, growing up, my dad was a Baptist preacher, and kind of transitioned from that into ministry. And so I grew up in a faith-based household, and I knew that I wanted to be part of a hunting show, but I wanted to be centered around sharing the gospel. And so I was like, man, who does that? So I, and at the time, like cinematic hunting films were just kind of being birthed onto the scene, if you will. And Heartland Bowhunter like caught my eye, and I was like, man, they're making some sick videos that are unlike anything else. They're using these DSLRs and all this stuff. And I was like, that'd be cool. But then there was this other show called Hollow Ground Outdoors, and with Joe Sir, and I forget the other guy. The other guy, actually, I found him on like Netflix or something. He has this other channel about history, and he's like he has like millions of views, and I was like, what in the world?
I think I know what you're talking about. I just recently saw that.
I don't forget what his name is, like Jared or something. I don't remember, but yeah, anyway, so I was like, man, that'd be sick to be on their show. Like, they've got some really cool content. So I reached out to them, and they were like, hey, like we really appreciate it, but we don't have any more room for staffers right now. And I was like, all right. And then my buddy Mike Kenyon was like, hey, dude, you should go talk to these guys called Final Descent Outdoors, because he had been watching them on the Pursuit channel. And so I contacted the host, and his name was Brad, and he was a super cool guy, and he was like, oh yeah, sure, dude, like we'll have you on. And I was like, okay, because I was a little bit bummed because the quality of their show was like, and but they had me on, and it turns out I was also kind of like trying to get into video editing as my career path, and I ended up kind of getting some internships and stuff and started to get really good at video editing. And as I started to develop a local customer group, and I started doing stuff for, obviously local companies and stuff, but my niche was always hunting related companies. And my customers were always like, hey, if we have a hunting client, we're sending them your way, because I always knocked it out of the park, because I was like, this is what I'm passionate about,
Yeah.
And and that kind of went in, and it kind of joined up with Brad with Final Descent, because he needed help editing, and so I started helping to edit his show, and I produced a lot of episodes for them. And so yeah, that's kind of where the whole media production background comes from. But I feel like I hit my pinnacle with that, and so now I flip homes, and I was kind of dabbling with that. And I decided to kind of make the whole switch from doing media for my full-time job to now doing construction and project management and all this other dumb stuff. But I really do enjoy what I'm doing now. But I felt like I was able to accomplish some cool things. I went on some really cool trips, went out to Idaho to shoot a commercial for a bullet reloading company, and that was just a blast. Rode with Brad and my brother for hours and hours in the car, because we drove the whole way.
Yeah.
And went to Mexico filming Brad, shoot a mule deer. Just some super, super cool experiences. Even through a contact that I had through one of my clients, I was able to shoot. It was supposed to be like a teaser show episode for Phil Robertson's new show, In the Woods with Phil, which ended up coming out shortly later. Of course, we weren't the producer. We weren't the film team, but being able to hang out for like a whole day and a half just filming Phil and hanging out with Alan and stuff and Kay, and it was like,
oh, that's awesome.
This is so cool. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah. I feel like that takes a special kind of person to be able to like have that experience and then willingly walk away, right? Because I feel like some guys, I feel like I would even be in that boat where it's like, man, once you get to that point, you're just kind of like in it and don't want to leave. But, was any of it ever at any point where you kind of got so familiar and people knew how good you were behind the camera filming the hunts that you felt like you were missing the hunt opportunity yourself?
Oh, man. I can't tell you how many big bucks I'd have on my wall if I wasn't trying to film them. Like, just a couple of years ago, I would have shot my personal best if it wasn't for having the camera there. But I don't know. I just kind of always adopted it, and it just was. It's always been. I would say up until this past year, there's never been a hunting season that has gone by without filming being the number one priority, and then killing the deer being kind of backseat to that, which is probably crazy. A lot of people probably can't say that. Most people probably put hunting on the priority, and then maybe eventually try to mix filming into it. But if you do it that way, you're going to probably drop filming pretty fast because it really screws things up. But
yeah, no, I get that. Honestly, if you've ever hunted with me and you're listening to this, you probably have heard me say I'll never sacrifice the hunt for the footage. And I think probably maybe some of my content reflects that because there's just times where I think there's just been seasons too where I kind of get burned out from it. And I'm just like, you know what? I need to leave the camera at home. I just need to go get in the tree stand, go get in the duck blind, whatever, and just have a good time.
Yep.
But I feel like I kind of had maybe a renewal of that passion, and so I'm excited for the years coming up. And as the gear gets a little better and easier to manage, it becomes more adaptable and things like that. But now with you doing a lot of public land hunting, are you a saddle guy?
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's for when saddle hunting first came onto the scene, I was like, this is insanity. Like, I'm like, holy crap! Like, I can shed so much weight with this. This is crazy. I didn't even care if I didn't know how to do it right away. I was like, I'm gonna figure it out. And because I still remember this one hunt that I went on, and I had packed this regular old hang-on my back on top of my camera backpack, which I had loaded to the hilt. And I went down into this swamp, and I put one foot down in the muck. And, I mean, it only went up to, maybe my knees, maybe a little under. And I just was like, I just fell straight back onto my back. And I was like, this is just terrible.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as soon as that came onto the scene, I quickly snatched up, I think it was mostly tethered stuff. Mm-hmm. I snatched it all up and got pretty good with it. And as soon as one sticking became a thing, I was like, I'm going to figure this out.
Oh, man, you're a one-stick guy.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And now I've shed so much weight. I'm really proficient with it, and there is no way anyone could convince me to go back ever.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
See, I'm kind of mildly scared of heights. So
Same.
Really?
Yeah. Well, here's the crazy thing, dude. So, like, back in the day, I used to hang these hang-on sets, I used to do these crazy things where you're looping your leg around the stick while you're leaning off the tree and you're setting the stand. I used to do all these dangerous stuff, but I've noticed that now I'm so used to constantly being tied in, and I'm used to having my weight on some sort of a strap and feeling that safety and security that now when I hang these hang-on sets and stuff, like, I feel freaked out because I'm always having at least 1 to 2 points of contact on the tree.
Yeah.
So I feel way more safe saddle hunting, especially with one sticking, because it just teaches you the fundamentals of always being tied in. That's the one thing I don't like about using multiple sticks with saddle hunting is you're still kind of at risk when you're climbing because you're only using that lineman's. Yeah. So if you do fall, you're going to get a stick to the gut. Like, you could fall farther than you want to, but when you do one stick, you're always tied in. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely have felt that, like, when I go back to just a regular stand and I'm standing in it and I'm
Feels
just like
weird.
freestanding, I'm like, yeah, this isn't safe. This isn't right. You know, I do like kind of feeling that constant pressure of leaning back and just knowing, okay, I'm good. This has me for sure.
The other thing that I feel like is huge with one sticking is the climbing down process, because you just don't even do it. Like, you clip into your rappel line, you drop your stuff, and like, you could freaking flip upside down. You could still rappel out of your tree safely, and that's one of the most dangerous parts, in my opinion, is climbing back down. When you got multiple sticks, you gotta watch your footing. You gotta take your sticks off. It's a process.
Yeah, especially in the dark.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
how does I never really fully understood the rappelling aspect. How do you, if you're rappelling down, how do you get your stuff from up top?
Yeah, so you have another line, and you clip it up on to your loop that's going around the tree. And so once you get down, you've got 2 lines. You've got your rope that you were putting all of your weight on, and that's just looped around the tree, and it's got some sort of a carabiner or something. So it's just kind of loosely, up there. And then when you pull on your other line, it pulls behind the carabiner, and it loosens that loop from around the tree, and the whole thing just
just drops.
Yeah, it just drops. You just pull it right out.
Got it.
But it's pretty slick.
Okay. I might have to do some exploring this summer to see if I can get
Careful.
that down.
Don't get too good. You will never go back.
Awesome. Do you use like a camera arm in the tree with you, or what do you do for a camera setup?
Yeah, I got like a Lone Wolf, one of those mini camera arms, and then I think I'm running like a Sony A7 III or something like that for my main camera, and then obviously GoPros are the way to go for everything else, pretty much.
Have you seen those new 360 cameras?
Yeah, I do have one.
Do you?
Yeah, I toyed around with it last year. I mounted it on my bow because I had this thought where I'm like, okay, if I see a deer and I want to stalk it, I'll just turn this thing on and I can get a shot of me and a shot of the deer at the same time. And like in theory, it worked really. It seemed like it would work really good. But then when I was going back through my footage, like it's tough to edit. It's not as easy. And it also is very, it's very bubbly compared to a GoPro image. And it's not quite as good when you're trying to spot a deer out in front of you and stuff, but it still does have its place. I'm going to run it this year, I think.
I've really thought about it as far as like waterfowl hunting goes, because you never know where the birds are coming from or which way they're going to fly or land or decoy or whatever. And I've seen some pretty cool stuff where the 360 camera comes in for that. If you're listening and don't know what we're talking about, it's like a GoPro type camera, but literally gives you 360-degree view angle, and you can kind of pick which angle you are going to use post-recording in your editing process. And so there's some fun things you can do with it. So cool. Well, hey, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to hear from our sponsor, and then we'll be right back.
We like to thank our sponsors, Chops & Co. Public Market. Chops & Co. specializes in locally grown, responsibly raised, high-quality pork products, direct from their farm to your table. Located in Jones, Michigan, give them a call at 269-244-1999.
All right, and we're back with Jake from Bowhunting and Pressured Whitetails, and we've had a great conversation so far, and we're going to continue it. Jake, we've talked about how you hunt a lot of public land. If you were to give advice to somebody who just was getting involved or active in hunting public land, what would be like the number one piece of advice you would give them?
Well, that's pretty tough because I feel like the topic in general is pretty complicated, especially when you get really into it. But I would say if I was just to try to give somebody like a quick synopsis of like go out and do this, I would say put on as many miles as you can postseason. Like right now, it's March, and I would be putting on tons and tons of miles, and pick your top 5 spots that you find, narrow it down to 3 of them, and then run cell cams on all of them. And you'll learn a lot throughout the summer. Sometimes you'll find out you got to move your cell cams or whatever, but that's what I kind of did. I tried to keep each of them, make sure there's a bedding area there so that the deer aren't just randomly passing through. Like there needs to be something holding them there. And the other thing I would say is don't base it so much off of what's on the public as much as the stuff that's off the public but close by, like on neighboring properties. Because I'd say like 90% of those big bucks are not really even living on the public. They're just passing through, and occasionally they'll bed in one of those bedding areas. So you're just trying to find that spot. And a lot of times those bucks are, who knows where, but finding that spot where it's like they're passing through. There's also this bedding area here, the signs here, and then you run cameras and you find them and you see that they are moving through, then you got a good spot.
Have you kind of found once you find a good spot that spot remains hot year after year, or is your hot spots kind of rotating amongst public land?
Well, there's definitely years that are hotter than others, but like really hard to say why, what makes them hotter than others, because the crops are constantly rotating, right? So if you've got soybeans and the deer hold more in the woods on public, well then you might be having better movement than if it was corn. So there's some stuff you just really have no control over, but in general, yeah, like usually it's because it stays good year after year because it's not based off of what's on the public as much as it's based off of what's going on the neighbors. And that doesn't really change too much. Usually if the neighbors aren't hunting it hard, they're not hunting it hard. And that doesn't change like crazy. And so there obviously is things that happen, like you'll have a guy walk through and, put his scent everywhere. But when you're running cell cams, you can monitor that. So you see the deer traffic drop off. You're like, well, of course I'm not going to go put a weekend over there. But then all of a sudden you see it pick up for no reason, and you're like, all right, I'm going to get in there. So
Yeah. And you also just talked about how, the crops, it really does matter. Talk to us about what is like your best case scenario if you were to look at like a neighborhood or block. What are things that like you're really looking for and kind of checking a list?
yeah, so I'm getting pretty crazy about this. I'm getting like turned into a mad scientist on this topic because I'm dabbling with trying to get some leases and getting a pool of buddies together so that we can affordably have hunting leases. And affordably, I mean like be able to put in like $400 or something and get in on a 100-acre lease. So I'm trying to get into this, and when I'm doing that, I'm like micro analyzing these properties and the surrounding properties and stuff. So if you do the same thing on public, I'd say the first thing I do is I look for public areas that are far away from cities and large congregates of people, because nobody wants to drive very far. And so usually the places that are close to the cities get just more pressure in general, and there's not much you can do about that. So I commit to being able to drive at least 30 minutes away from my house if it means I have to, sometimes 40. And then the other thing I look for is big parcels, because the bigger the parcel, just the better chance that a deer has to make it past 4, because there's not as many hunters. Like some of these spots that I've looked at, there's like 7-8 parcels of 20 acres that are all buttoned up. It's like, how many hunters are going after the same deer? Yeah. And the chances that a deer makes it past that golden 3.5-year-old age is very small. But when you get large parcels, there's not as many dudes hunting in general. A deer can make it through pretty easy, can avoid hunters and stuff like that. And then I'll also say I love targeting areas that are close to ag, just because it seems like antlers are bigger, genetics are better, all around.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for sharing those tips with us. You mentioned earlier how it was kind of your dad that got you into hunting, and I was checking out your page and saw a video of you taking a youth out hunting. Talk to us about just the importance of that. What did that mean for you as a kid? I mean, obviously it was made a huge impact on your life. And then why do you think it's important to be able to continue giving youth those opportunities?
Yeah, it's huge. And I would say it's more important now than ever, because I feel like youths getting into hunting is becoming less and less of a cultural thing where dads are getting their kids into hunting. It's more becoming a trending thing, just based off of social media and everything that's happening. So I feel like there's a lot of people that want to get into the sport and just have nowhere to turn to. They have no one to look up to that can actually give them this hands-on stuff. There's so much media out there right now that is inspiring, which is good, but it's a totally different game when you get out there into the woods. And not only that, but to me, hunting is extremely therapeutic, like coming off of this winter season, getting out into the woods and walking around, I'm just like, this is what I needed, Yeah. And I think to be able to give that to a youth hunter, it's just like, you just see it in their eyes, like they just light up. Like you realize like they needed this, and it's huge. Yeah, I'm trying to think of where to go with that, but
Sure. Yeah, no, I have definitely seen that. I don't know if you have listened at all and heard a little bit of my story, but that's how, I got involved through an older mentor in my life, kind of turning me on to hunting. I grew up in the city, and so, my dad hunted when he was in college, but, and it was never exposed to that, or he, never went on any hunting trips when I was growing up. And it wasn't until I got involved with camp and got out here away from the city, met some people, that hunting really kind of started to present itself even as an opportunity. And then when I moved out here, that older man that was a mentor in my life, he invested in me, and I just wanted to be around him. And so if I wanted to be around him, I had to do what he was doing. And often, he was using his free time to, do work on tree stands, to get, the grounds in shape, planting food plots, trimming trees, shooting lanes. He was, working on gun stuff. And so I kind of started getting interested in that as well, and started doing, hunt camp with him. And really just kind of, that just lit that fire, that passion for me. And now, here I am. I've had the opportunity to take other kids out hunting as well. We had a kid who lost his dad to COVID, and we took him turkey hunting for the first time, and he shot his first bird, and that was just phenomenal. And quite the experience just to be a part of. I feel blessed to be a part of that. And there's another kid on camp here who, I've put in the tree stand and the deer stand, and we haven't gotten any shot opportunities yet. He had his scope on one for the first time this year, but it was a little bit on the smaller side, so we decided to make the pass there. But even just seeing that passion, hear these kids where they just dread their alarm going off for school, right?
Right.
They don't want to roll out of bed, they don't want to wake up, they don't want to do it, but then here they are setting their own alarm to go hunting in the morning. They're getting dressed, they're making themselves breakfast, ready just to rip. And it's cool just to kind of see that passion in something you taught about, just the way that it impacts you personally. It's therapeutic for you, and I'd love just to dive into that a little bit. You have mentioned kind of your faith. You're a person of faith. You're a believer in Christ as well as I am, and kind of our mutual connection. I know that there's a faith connection there, just how you guys know each other through church. Talk to me about what hunting has meant for you in your faith journey, and how has that played a role?
Gosh, it's been huge, honestly. I remember even in the early years where I was out, sitting in tree stands by myself, and honestly, when you're out there, you have nothing else to entertain but your own thoughts. And it's the nature is present. Obviously, God's creation is amazing, and his presence is very real when you're out there, and you just realize there's no way in heck this all just randomly happened. You just know down in your soul, God's real. But then on top of that, I remember really wrestling with my sin in tree stands, and just realizing gosh, I've messed up. I've not been making good choices, and and stuff like that. And that was when I was younger, and I remember God really confronting me with different issues that I had back then. But nowadays, I don't know, going out there, and there's something about watching a sunset happen, and listening to the birds chirp, and it's just crazy. In my opinion, it's absolutely insane how people can believe that that the evolution is the reason for all of it, because I think God gave animals the ability to adapt and all this crazy stuff, but there's such a design behind everything. It's just phenomenal, and I think a lot of people are missing out when they don't go out into nature and just experience it, because you don't really experience it the same way if you just go on a hike or you just go on a walk in the middle of the day. People just don't know. You immerse yourself in this world that's happening, regardless if you're there or not. And all these animals that God's created, they know how to take care of themselves. God's given them the abilities, into their DNA, to survive in this ecosphere. And you just really realize, the earth's not dependent upon us. God made us and the rest of the earth, and we get to steward it. But yeah, honestly, I don't know what I would do if I didn't hunt. Like I said, I'd have to bass fish or something to get me out into nature constantly, because I couldn't do without it for sure.
Yeah, well, I think there's definitely something there. I mean, the whole reason we do camp ministry is to, get kids unplugged from their devices, to get them out of the normal things of life and get them outdoors. And hunting does that and provides that outlet as well. I loved what you were talking about, and just like being in a tree stand and, maybe even just like wrestling with God a little bit and just having some things in your heart exposed. I think of the verse, Psalm 51:10 through 12, where it says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and uphold me with a willing spirit." And, that's kind of just become, the Lord just uses the outdoors, the tree stand, the silence and solitude in it, to do that process, I guess. I can totally relate to what you're saying of like, I've wrestled with God in a tree stand, because like it's finally like it took me to remove myself from busyness and to sit still for 3 to 4 hours with my own thoughts and with nothing else kind of interrupting me. And it's like, all right, God, we got some things we got to talk about, man, because I'm struggling here, or I don't understand this, or I know that I'm doing this and I'm not loving you well, and I'm not loving my family well, and I need you to kind of create that clean heart in me. And oftentimes I'll kind of reference that tree stand to be that prayer chair, just to get away and connect with God.
And there's so many levels to it, which I feel like is one of the coolest things about hunting, because there is that level where you're in the tree stand and you're reflecting, but then there's also that extreme, like physically involved endurance aspect of hunting. Like there's that aspect where it's like, I'm going in to try to accomplish something I've never done successfully before. I'm going to give it everything I have. I'm probably going to fail a lot, and I'm going to keep at it. And like doing that out in nature up against one of the most crazy awesome animals that lives around us all the time, it just really humbles you, because, I think as a non-hunter looking in, you look at the whitetail deer and you're just like, it's a deer, I see them all the time. And I think in Michigan we're really lucky. I was just in Alabama and I'm like, where's the deer? But we're really lucky here. And I think if you're not a hunter, you don't realize how wary these animals are. Like God has given them incredible ability to avoid us, like avoid dying. And it's just, it's insane.
And they're tough animals too. If you don't, especially if you're bow hunting, if you don't get the right shot.
I was listening to your story of your buck. Like that was like, I feel you. Cause like I've done similar things, and it's the toughness of them is just incredible. And it really makes you respect them, and it's just, it helps to humble you. And I feel like that's probably one of the most important things that has ever happened to me in my life would be the circumstances that God has brought into my life that has humbled me, because, spiritually as well. Like I feel like I grew up with a pretty large head. I was a PK and then I was an MK. And when it came to spiritual things, I felt like, I kind of knew it all. Like I knew all the books of the Bible frontwards and backwards. Like I could win the Bible drills. Like I had memorized a lot of scripture and stuff like that. And then, different circumstances happen in life, and I realized I don't know everything like I thought I did. And, and knowledge isn't everything either. Like the Pharisees knew a ton of stuff, and Jesus was like, hey, you're not as close as me as you thought. And that's when you really just realize, like, man, it's more than just knowing stuff, And I think that's one of the most humbling things ever when it comes to our walk with God is when you just get out of your head and you're like, God, what do you have for me? And it's that experiential relationship part of knowing God and listening to Him speak to you, and just, it's incredible, and it humbles you.
Yeah, and I feel like even that trust factor of like, allowing God to take control, and when we're out hunting, we want to be in control of every single aspect.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We're playing a game of chess, and we want to control everything in our power to be able to win that game of chess. And so, when we're looking at our life, Scripture says to gain your life is to lose it. And, So just that idea of kind of letting go and letting God just take control, and it's uncomfortable at times, and there's a lot of trust that has to go into that. And like you said, that's where that relationship aspect comes in, where you just have to kind of lean first on God's word, and then second on just your relationship with him and that trust.
Yeah, that's a huge one. I'm not good with giving up control. I don't think most guys are.
For sure. Well, hey, Jake, thanks for joining us this week. Audience, I just encourage you, check out Bowhunting Pressured Whitetails, Instagram, YouTube. We'll drop the links in our page. Show Jake some love. Subscribe to his channel. Like his Instagram. Follow him along. And we're just super stoked. And just, again, thanks for being a part of the podcast this week.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I really love what you're doing. I've been blessed to listen to some of your episodes. I literally just, found out about you, but I've been listening to episodes, and I really like the structure and everything. And yeah, hope the best for you and the channel too.
Thank you. Well, hey, if you have questions or comments, go ahead, email forest.sky.hunting@gmail.com. Again, forest.sky.hunting@gmail.com. Other than that, make sure you like, subscribe, share, and we will catch you next week.